So now we'll talk about the specific component inside the Azure storage account. So Azure Blob Storage is a service for storing large amounts of unstructured object data, such as text or binary data. So if you create like many videos, you live stream your videos, you can configure it to be pushed to a blob storage account, and it will be getting saved all there. And then you can retrieve it from there and push it to a data analytics tool in Azure or anywhere else, and you can start actually doing things out of that. It can be video, it can be text, it can be any kind of binary data. So these are the main like use cases for blob storage. So all the text files and all the video and images, all these can be stored here. And this is the basic purpose of using blob storage. So you can use blob storage to expose data publicly to the world or to store application data privately. So if you have like a set of photographs, like pictures, and you want those pictures, maybe it's your product images, what all you have published on your website. So you can store it in a blob storage, and whenever a user hits on your browser, all those images will be loaded from the blob storage. So all such components of your application can be put inside a blob storage, and you can actually manage the access, like how the user will be able to retrieve those, and what it cannot access and what it can access. So common uses of blob storage includes serving images or documents directly to a browser. So that's what I was referencing to. And storing files for distributed access. So suppose you want to give access to a large group of users or companies, access to the same file. So it's like a SharePoint concept, the shared server access. So you can use this blob storage for distributed access as well. So different groups of people can access the same blob storage with different set of permissions and different set of authorizations. So some people might access it only for reading purpose. Some people might access it for reading as well as updating it. So different people can access the same blob storage, and it can be a shared set of stored components for different people. And for storing data for backup and restore, disaster recovery and archiving. So when we talk about backing up our VM's disk, in not managed disk, but the unmanaged disk, then we actually talk about storage accounts, and we create multiple copies, like we create a backup service and push the data into a blob storage account where it is periodically updated, either from your on-premise VM or in a VM in Azure. So you can configure a backup service which will take the changes, the delta changes from your VM in Azure or on-premise, and push it to the storage account. So it can be used for backup and restore activity as well. And in disaster recovery, again, it is used. But disaster recovery in general, it is a big concept. But yeah, Azure storage is a part of that. And you can definitely use it for archiving, as we understood from the tiers, cool, hot, cool, and archive. So you can use the archive tier to archive large volumes of your data, which you rarely access, and you'll pay very minuscule amount for that. And you can be rest assured that it is like highly available whenever you need it. The concept of Azure Blob will discuss a few important like what all makes the blob storage in an Azure storage account. So all access to Azure storage is done through a storage account. So when we say like Azure storage, everything is done inside a storage account. So we understood like we can create 3 types of a storage account: GPv2, blob storage, or GPv1. So first step is to create an Azure storage account. So all access to Azure storage is done through a storage account. That is mandatory. This account can be a general purpose or a blob storage that we have discussed. So now inside the Azure storage account, you will find all these 4 components: blob, files, queues, and tables, which we will discuss more. So right now we are discussing blob. So out of these 4 components inside blob, you will be having another component, container, which you need to create. So if we talk about container, a container provides a grouping of a set of blobs. So if you try to understand the hierarchy, there is an account, the image, the picture in this slide explains it well. So you have an account named Sally, which is an Azure storage account. And inside that Azure storage account, you have a blob service, which is not reflecting here. Like between the account and container, you can put another layer, which will be identifying the blob service. You'll understand it better if I show you in the portal. Once again. So here, if you see, I'm inside an Azure storage account, and I see these services, which are four fundamental services inside an Azure storage account. So this can be named as Sally, and inside this Sally storage account, we will go inside the blob service, and inside that service, we'll be having an option to create a container. So I will go back to the image. So here is an account called Sally, a storage account. Within this account, there are four types of services: blob, file, queues, and tables. Within the blob service, you can create multiple containers, and inside each container, you can keep multiple blob files. It can be a JPG image file, it can be an AVI, like a video file. So you can classify using different container names what all content, what all kinds of blobs you're going to store in it. So this is the basic hierarchy of how blob storage is managed inside an Azure storage account. So a container provides a grouping of a set of blobs, which is very evident from here, this image. All blobs must be in a container. So you cannot create a blob directly inside an Azure storage account. You will have to put, means it will not allow you to do that. So as soon as you want to upload an image, it will ask you to put it inside a container. So it should be related to a container. An account can contain an unlimited number of containers, and a container can store an unlimited number of blobs. So the number is unlimited, but there is a overall storage capacity limit at the level of storage account. So any GPv2 storage account cannot store more than 500 TB of data, which is quite significant, but still there is an upper limit beyond which you cannot go. So even though you can store unlimited number of blobs inside unlimited number of containers, there is something which is going to stop you, and that is the storage capacity for the storage account. A disk is something which is concretely related to a particular virtual machine. It is associated with the VM, okay? It cannot be used for any other purpose. And this storage, like this blob service storage, can be used by any number of services. It is not specific to a VM. So as soon as we say OS or data disk, it is only meant for a VM. It cannot be used by any other service in Azure or any other service outside of Azure.
Are you saying that I can't connect one VM to another VM?
No, you can connect. Means that is a VM to VM communication. So VM will always be in the picture. Suppose I'll give you an example. So suppose you have a lot of data that you want to push to a like data analytics tool. So you can put it inside a blob storage account. All the data will be there, and as soon as new data comes, that data will be available for the data analytics tool to do its activity. You can put a VM inside that, but that will have its limitations. You will have to create disks out of it, and put the efficiency will be lesser.
So are you saying that it's like a file system if I talk in terms of the old systems?
Yeah, means files will come. Right now we are talking about blob storage service, blob service. So there is a file service also, which is like a file share service, like network share, which we can use. So that is another component in storage account. But what I'm trying to say here is, if I go inside the Azure portal, suppose you have a VM, right? And you create a VM with unmanaged disk. You can actually create a container here, like this container. What happens is, I'll just name it like VHDs. Okay. I'll keep it at private. Okay. So it will create a VHDs folder. So when you create a VM, you actually either, if you are pushing it from on-premise, you will upload that entire VHD file in this container. You can name it anyways, but normally what happens is, when you create a VM with unmanaged disk, Azure will automatically create a container in that storage account which you have defined, and it will put a VHD inside this container. So when we say VM disk, it is actually a VHD. And when I'm talking about these like blob storage, they don't necessarily need to be a VHD file. They can be an image file. They can even be a PPT file. So they can be anything. They can be further processed for any kind of activity that you want to do. And when we say VM disk, it has to be a VHD, and it has to be it can be a part of a storage account for unmanaged disk, but it is quite specifically associated with this particular VM that you're trying to configure it with.
Yeah, like a storage account is like your OneDrive or Google Drive. You can keep any data in it, but for the disk, it is associated with the virtual machine. That's the
Yeah, and
difference.
it is in a specific format. It is in a .vht format. So it's not like you can click on this container and you can start reading out of it. So that VHD file is like can be read only from a VM perspective. It's not available.
Okay, I understood.
Yeah. So that cannot be read just like that. If even if you share it with someone, they cannot click on it and read all the data inside that. But it all comes under the same umbrella. It's like different components inside that storage account perspective. Now, since managed disk has come, the concept of storage account itself is becoming obsolete, but it will not become obsolete because storage account is not only used for VM, it is used for many other services. So that's where the distinction comes. So if it was to be if storage account was meant only for VMs, it should be becoming obsolete very fast, because now VMs, most of the VMs are coming, like most people are opting for managed disk with VMs, so that they don't need to create any storage account. They don't need to put their VHD in a storage account. It's all done by Microsoft. But since Azure storage account is very generic component, that's why it says general purpose. So it's quite general in its nature, and it's not just catering to VM as a storage component, but to lot many services. So as you will discover more and more about how Azure and services interact with each other, blob storage is like storage in general is a very you can say it coalesces with other services quite well. So it becomes part of other services, and you can use it in your application for many small things as well as big things. And disk is just a part of it. Yeah. So this will make it even more clear when we talk about what type of blobs these are. So so you must be understanding the hierarchy here. Storage account, inside that you have 4 types of services. If you talk about blobs, you have containers inside those blob service, and inside those containers you have actual blobs residing inside those containers, like these JPG files or movie files or any kind of video files. So a blob is a file of any type and size. So that is the very basic and generic like expression. So it can be any kind of any type of file or any size of file. And in Azure storage, it is offering 3 types of blobs. One is block blobs, one is page blobs, and the third one is append blobs.
When you are telling me that blob storage where I put all my virtual hard drives for my VMs, correct?
Yes.
Or by files.
Yes.
Okay. So what happened if I really go out and go to the URL? Do I have access to this data publicly?
That's what I'm saying.
Because
It will. Yeah. Please.
yeah, because this kind of defies all purpose of security.
That's what I'm saying. So when we were discussing about security, there's a lot more to it. When we say shared access signature, so all these things will come in the future slides as well. I'll show you on the portal as well. So if you have such a requirement that the data is not at all that critical, not confidential, you can make it publicly accessible. I'll just show you here. So here you see the public access level. So now here you have 3 types of options. You can make it private, no anonymous access. Only people who have actually been given explicit permission on this storage account using an RBAC rule, those people only will be able to access. If you give this blob access, so what it is trying to say is that you will have anonymous read access for blobs only. So inside Azure storage, we have 4 components. One of the component will be accessible for read. And if you talk about container level access, then you have anonymous read access for containers and blobs. So everything inside a container, uh, like not a specific JPG file, but all the files that are part of that container will be accessible in terms of reading. So this is just to give you a picture. It's nothing like there's a lot more to it. I'm just trying to help you with the fundamental concept that there are so many ways of managing the access. So it's up to you how critical the data is for you, and with whom you want to share it. So all the options are available. If something is very fundamental and is for like general knowledge, something which is already public, but you want to share it here in a blob storage, you can do it with public access, and that should not be a problem. But depending on your requirement, you can change it. Okay. Yeah, it's all configurable. But yes, that's the valid point. If you have your endpoint and you have assigned anonymous access at the public level, then anybody can access that. But you should be doing it intentionally. If that is by mistake, then you need to put some measures for checking those things. But if you do it intentionally, yes, people can access it. That's the objective of it. Like, it's not that you want to restrict everything. Yeah, you might be willing to share certain things as well. So it provides you an easy way of doing that. So when we talk about a blob, it is a file of any type or size, and Azure Storage is providing you three types of blobs. So block blob, page blob, and append blob. So just to make it more familiar, page blob is any kind of virtual machine hard disk, not hard disk like it's a data disk or OS disk, any disk that comes attached with a VM. So all the VM disks are page blobs. So these are actually having a 512 bytes pages, which have very good read-write access. We'll discuss this more, but fundamentally, all the VM disks are page blobs. And when we say block blobs, these are the blobs which store the all the files, all kinds of documents or movies or video files or audio files, any kind of content of that nature is part of block blobs. And similarly, it is for append blob as well. There are slight advantages with block blobs which are not available with append blobs. So append is for more like adding on to the same blob. We'll discuss it further, but append blob and block blob are quite similar, and page blob is quite different, and it is exclusively used for like VMs.
So what is the size of the block blob?
You can have it here. So all the information is in the slide itself. So block blobs, each block, like within a block blob, you can have separate unique blocks. So each block can be a different size up to a maximum of 100 MB. So this is the limitation at the block level, which is a part of the block blob. Used for storing text or binary files such as documents and media files, a single block blob can contain up to 50,000 blocks. So if you do the mathematics, individual block blobs can be up to 4.75 terabytes TB in size. So simple mathematics, the maximum size of a single block inside a block blob is 100 MB, and maximum allowed number of blocks inside a block blob is 50,000. So it comes around to be close to 4.75 TB. I think that answers your question, right?
So are you saying that we can't put 101 MB file in a block blob?
Yeah, that is the maximum for a single file. Yeah. But if you suppose I think we are taking it in an incorrect way. Suppose you have a 1 GB file. So what Azure storage blob storage will do, it will divide it into 10 blocks. So you don't need to worry about it. So suppose you are uploading a 1 GB file. It's not that it will stop you from uploading it. What it will do, it will create 10 blocks out of that one file. And it is a way Azure manages the storage in blob storage. So it will divide it into 10 blocks, and the file will be available to you. You will be allowed to push, but Azure will consider it as two blocks of storage. Okay, that's how it manages the storage inside blob storage. Otherwise, there'll be no way of how much limit you can have inside the particular block blob. So with a block blob, you can upload multiple blocks in parallel to decrease upload time. So block blob is quite rich in terms of managing the documents and media files. Append blob is good, but it has many restrictions. So each block in an append blob can be a different size, up to a maximum of 4 MB. So the first restriction is in the size itself. So you can understand, like again here also you can add larger files, but again the block size is lower. So again the overall size of the storage will be lower, which we'll see in the third point. So are similar to block blobs in that they are made up of blocks. So that is the fundamental similarity between append blobs and block blobs. They are similar. They are having the same concept behind it. They all divide the storage in blocks, but they are optimized for append operations. So they are useful for logging scenarios. So if you have a logging, like you want to push the logs into your storage, append blobs is the right kind of a storage to choose for that. So they are optimized for this particular kind of scenario for append operations. So a single append blob can contain up to, again, the limitation is same, 50,000 blocks. But as you saw in the first line, the maximum size for one block is 4 MB. So for a total size of slightly more than 195 GB, which is the mathematics here, 4 MB into 50,000. So for an append blob, you can have a maximum of 195 GB in one append blob storage, which is like 4.75 terabyte for one block blob. For page blobs are a collection of 512 byte pages. So they are not managed in a way of different blocks are there. They're actually having pages, and they are very small in terms of comparison to 100 MB and 4 MB. So they're only 512 bytes of pages, but they're optimized for random read and write operations. So when we are managing VMs, we need random, like frequent read and write operations. So that's where page blobs comes into picture. So it's immediately committed. With block blobs, you have an option to upload it and commit it later, but commit in the sense make it part of the storage right away. You have an option of uploading it and leaving it uncommitted, and later on you can commit those to your actual storage. And with page blobs, as soon as you write something, it becomes part of the page blob. So with page blobs, it can be up to 8 TB in size and are more efficient for frequent read-write operations. Azure virtual machines use page blobs as OS and data disks. Okay. Any questions in this?
So, yeah, Gaurav, when you say block blob, once you commit, can you do changes in that?
Yeah, you can do that, but not in append blobs. So append blobs don't allow you to update or delete the blobs. So you need to delete the entire blob. Inside that, you cannot specifically delete a particular block. So with block blobs, that's the difference between these two. So they are mostly for logging purposes, logging scenarios, operations where you need to keep on appending, not do any other operation. With block blob, you have rich exposure to managing the storage. That's the fundamental
So you are
difference
saying that
between
I
these.
can, okay, so you are saying that I can make changes to the certain sections.
You can make changes to any section depending on the authorization that you have. If you have full permissions on the storage account and the block blob that you are referencing to, then you can even delete it entirely. So you can do anything. It depends on the authorization that you have been given.
Okay.
Yeah. So that access that you're talking about, so that decides your privilege.
So Gaurav, now I have a very practical question over here.
Okay.
So let's say on an enterprise application, the various applications are generating the logs. And let me take a very generic example. Like we have a CI/CD pipeline. So in that we have let's say we have the Jenkins and where the various projects are being created, artifacts and the Docker images are being created and all that. So the logs are getting generated. So that's one logs that we are getting generated. Then the application logs are getting generated. And let's say we are using the ELK stack for that Elasticsearch and Kibana and all that. So there are two options now. One option is that when we are creating these Jenkins servers and the ELK servers, we attach this SDD over there, or SSD, whatever the drive is. So by that we create the VM and the logs are getting written on that. The other option what I can see is that we attach that the logs can be written to these storage which you are just showing.
Yes. Yeah.
So what are the pros and cons? Means, is it that the writing to these storage is gonna take time? Is the performance, or so which way means you suggest that is gonna be good? Whether
Depends
it's
on
the
depends on the application architecture. Like if the architectural design is going means sometimes the architecture doesn't allow you to configure it with an external storage and put the place the logs there. So if the architecture and design is not suitable for this kind of thing, then
no,
certainly
no,
yeah.
that's not my question. My question is that in your view, what are the pros and cons? Do you know any
Okay.
pros and cons that if we use this storage rather than SDD, because you can put this SDD drive,
SSD drive,
you
yeah.
can put
So the
yeah
first pro that comes to me in the mind, very generic view, you will save a lot of money. So because this is
money
very
on
cheap, this is very cheap.
using
This
the
is storage.
storage.
Yeah, this is storage is very cheap. So when you will actually go into the understanding how much you will end up paying, it will be very minuscule cost for you. So the storage in Azure is quite cheap. So the other component that you get, all the replication point of views. So you can your data is getting replicated to multiple copies are getting created, and multiple locations it is available, and then the availability part comes in, and the other components will be
What
like
about the performance? What about the
performance.
IO
Performance
performance?
depends. Performance depends. Like it depends on your application design, how you have configured this storage. Like uh, yeah, definitely, if you are putting it right away in the VM's SSD, obviously that performance is going to be better. But it depends how critical it is. So if logging is very critical and it has to be accessed right away within the VM itself, then you will prefer it doing it there. But if it can be put in somewhere, some second external storage like outside the VM, and it can be retrieved from there and processed and create and a data and a dashboard can be created out of that logs which are being pushed to the blob storage, then that will suit you in that case. But obviously the performance, if you're comparing with an SSD of the VM and then comparing it with the blob storage which is outside the VM, then definitely it will be different. Yeah, it will be definitely it will be better, but it depends. If you end up paying more for something you're not using that frequently, then it's not worth it. So cloud's concept is to optimize the resources and the money you end up paying. So the best example that I can actually relate to one of the active scenarios that you are doing, we're actually having lot many JSON files coming in from customer. So we see so many JSON files and we need to convert it into CSV. So we use function apps to convert those JSON to CSV, and we use it, store all those JSONs in storage. Although we are not using blob storage there, we are using ADLS, Azure Data Lake Store, but it is quite similar. So in ADLS, we put all the JSON files, and we process is it using a function app. So that function app runs and it processes all the JSONs to CSV, and that CSV is then pushed to a SQL database, and that SQL database then pushes it to a Power BI dashboard. So entire dashboard is created using those JSON files. So this is how it can help you. So like storage, this Azure storage is a small component of your application, and you can use it in different ways uh, to be used inside your application and make your application more efficient. So That way you need to understand how, because it's quite flexible. So that's what I meant when it coalesces with multiple services. So it's quite flexible and it allows different ways of using it.
If I have a file and I need to upload it to the container, like do I need to choose which type of blob I need to store in, like page blob or blob or append, or it by default it will select?
No. I'll show you right here. 1 second. So if I if I go inside a container, I click on upload. So it will first ask me to browse the file in my local, and then it will give me these options. So I can choose if it is a blob, it is a page blob, it is an append blob. Okay. So it gives you an option here itself. And then you can decide, like it's giving you an option of, like if you have a very large files you are using, large file blocks you are using, you can give the maximum size to 100 MB so that the number of blobs are lesser.
Okay.
Just
So is there any cost difference for it? Like if I choose blob or page blob or append blob for this one?
Yes, there is a cost difference definitely attached to it. Yeah. We'll get into costs. I don't think I have a specific slide here, but yeah, I can take you to the portal and help you with the costs.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely there is a cost. And page blob is costlier, definitely. Because it gives you high performance in terms of read and write operation.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So yeah, cost keeps on varying depending on, there are so many factors attached to the cost. So, but yeah, there is a difference.